I think that in that fear, sometimes also we see a lack of preparation, that when people have not really, really learned their content or really, really decided the direction of a meeting they'd like to conduct, they tend to go faster because they're sort of driving through an unformed agenda. And I think that's another reason they stay in their head. I mean, there's quite a lot of reasons. People stay in their heads. They're thinking about what they want to say instead of the other person. So as soon as they hear that silence, they go in. And I think if I were just summarizing the macro, I would say we're just afraid of the pause in every way.
Welcome to Think Deeply, Speak Simply, the podcast that explores the art and science of business communication. Sponsored by Prezent, the AI-powered platform transforming the way professionals share ideas and tell their stories. And now, here's your host, Rajat Mishra, CEO of Prezent and passionate advocate for clear and impactful communications.
In today's workplace, time feels like the scarcest resource. Deadlines, meetings, and endless messages leave little time to think, let alone communicate with clarity. As Stephen Covey said, the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. Effective communication isn't just what you say, it's about creating the space to think it through. On today's episode of Think Deeply, Speak Simply, we are joined by Juliet Funt, keynote speaker and author of A Minute to Think. She helps Fortune 500 companies rediscover the power of the strategic pause. Juliet will introduce us to the white space, intentional moments of unscheduled time that spark sharper ideas, stronger collaboration, and more authentic leadership. From tackling the thieves of time to finding a healthier cadence in our work, she knows how pausing isn't slowing down. It's the key to connecting with impact. Juliet, I'm so excited to have you on this episode of Think Deeply, Speak Simply. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful intro. I love it. Let's go.
Thank you. Thank you. So before we get into some of the questions, Juliet, tell us a little bit about your background and how did you get interested in this area of work? And I know you do it with the Fortune 500 companies, but also with military.
Yes, and we'll talk about military later. And I'll also talk about how we're moving into much smaller companies, which I'm fascinated by right now. I've been doing my own work for 25 years. We've been a company for 14, and it all started because I am what I say the sickest rat in this experiment. I am a hyper busy, high energy, anxious, go kind of a lady. And my entire formative years were used trying to find stabilizing mechanisms to get the most out of myself, which then led to, as many experts find, you end up solving your own problem. And then you find that you've solved a problem for a lot of other people. And so white space or pausing, which we'll get to the technical instruction in a minute, it could not be more antithetical to my personality. The opening of my book talks about how I used to hold my lips closed on calls when it was a phone to try to not interrupt because I just go at a million miles an hour. But I have discovered for myself, for clients, that the transformative power of this time is just endless. It's just endless. And the biggest connect is that it is not a rest and relaxation tool, but it's a business advancement tool. That when we have time to think, when we have time to recover like an Olympian, we can then pursue growth and revenue opportunities with more rigor, more focus, and more speed, which is what every business wants.
Great. Excellent. I love how you overcame something that was that you were struggling with yourself. And like you said, the best companies and ideas are built by solving a problem for yourself, and you realize millions of people
yes
have the same problem. So let's get into it. So white space. So let's start there.
All right.
What is white space? Why is it important?
Yes. So many people have heard the term over the years. One of the little fun facts is we hold the trademark for the term white space, and we've been teaching it for so long. But a lot of people misconstrue it in a lot of different ways. So let me start by leveling that field. White space is defined as time without assignment. So it is that time that used to be in between things. And now there is no in between anymore. It used to be the time when you would cook an idea or question an assumption or validate where you're heading or stabilize your body. And we, of course, have grouted in all of those gaps with digital touches and what we call hallucinated urgency, where we're always moving every single second towards something that feels pressing. And the analogy that is most central is that of building a fire. So if you imagine building a fire, you could have all the best wood and all the best fire starter. But if you put it too tightly together and there's no oxygen in between the combustibles, it will never, ever ignite. And people are the same. They must be oxygenated in their day, in their calendar, in their mind, so that they can take that little spark that they wake up with every day and ignite it into a blaze of contribution in their work. And everywhere we look, it's very sad to say how long, especially post-COVID, how long people have been talking about trying to make work more sane and humane, worried about burnout, worried about well-being. But I say the same thing every single year, which is I've never seen people busier. So it's a diabolical trend that no matter what we get worried about, we still think the answer to every business problem is to push harder, when really the answer is often to oxygenate.
I love that analogy with fire and firewood. So let's bring it to communication, Juliet. So when it comes to communicating, delivering your messages, why is white space so important?
Yes. White space, as we teach it, is about 80% a productivity and efficiency tool. When people have margin, they show up in every single element of their work better. They're sharper, they're smarter, they have more insight, they have more focus, and they, most importantly, arrive at business goals faster because their mind is sharp. But there is about 20% of it, since it's our focus for today, that lives in the realm of communication. I will give you some simple examples. We work with a lot of sales teams. We coach them on their presentation skills. And one of the things that's interesting about sellers is they have these huge egos, usually, of course. That's what makes them great. They have to have a huge ego. They slide into a chair for a 2:00 call at 1:59. They spin around and they go, right? And they begin communicating a message where if they were to have just 10 minutes of white space before that call, 100 wonderful, beneficial things would happen. First of all, they would settle their own neurological energy so that they would be present and really focused. But much more importantly, they would be able to take a bath in the experience of the person they're about to talk to. They could read notes. They can think about what happened last time. They can prepare for, oh, that guy, I remember that guy doesn't like it when I do this thing. And so that 10 minutes of white space interlaced in between a busy seller's calendar as just one example changes 1,000% the first words that they say. Then now let's follow this seller. Let's make him Ted. And now we're following Ted into the conversation. Ted is going to have an impulse to jump on the ends of the topics of the last person's statement. So they tend to jump in at the end. But a little margin, a little absorption time, and a little willingness to have some white space or silence in a conversation can do wonderful things. For instance, men have a tendency to come up with a secondary thought during white space. And what that means is they'll end their thought, and then they'll cook for a second, and then they'll have a secondary thought. But if you jump in immediately, you've just lost the secondary thought. And if you're a seller or an executive or a manager, you want the secondary thought. We're cutting people off unconsciously because we're just so afraid of any kind of downtime or margin. One more place, I'll just keep going till you got me off, white space affects communication, is actually having time to think before you speak. And there's a story that I told in the book about a wonderful woman named Angela Ahrens who was on a huge stage. I can't remember, 5,000, 10,000 people. She would take a 1 or 2 second pause between everything that was asked of her and her response. And the interviewer who told me this story said he remembered it for the rest of his career, and he consolidated that story by thinking it's not about your response time, it's about your response. And so there are so many places where just having that oxygenation margin, pausing within communication makes a huge difference.
So that's very insightful, Juliet. So why do people do that, right? Why not pause, let the response settle in, and then hear the secondary thought, and then respond to that? So what is it psychologically in us as humans that we want to jump in and fill that space?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you can see it demonstrated in the filler words that are in our culture now. So like, and are fear of silence. Their fear of that pause, like and and you can if you go to Toastmasters, which is a wonderful thing for anyone to do. If someone out there has never heard of Toastmasters, it's a club you can join for free, and they will coach you on your presentation skills. But they have something called the counter. And it's just a person who sits there every single time you use any form of filler word, like, so, and unnecessarily, and they count them. You would be shocked, especially like. And so the reason that we do that, you ask me why, filler words or jumping in too quickly, I think it has a couple of different subsets. So one subset is we have been taken over by 1,000 forms of anxiety at work. And Chester Elton actually wrote a book called Anxiety at Work, which is a wonderful book. But the free-floating nervousness, let's just call it nervousness because anxiety might feel too clinical a definition for people. The nervousness of if you're coming off right, the nervousness of whether this deal will close, the nervousness of how you're doing in the interview, 1,000 forms of nervousness. And it just makes you jumpy. It just makes you go in faster. I think that in that fear, sometimes also we see a lack of preparation, that when people have not really, really learned their content or really, really decided the direction of a meeting they'd like to conduct, they tend to go faster because they're sort of driving through an unformed agenda. And I think that's another reason they stay in their head. I mean, there's quite a lot of reasons. People stay in their heads. They're thinking about what they want to say instead of the other person. So as soon as they hear that silence, they go in. And I think if I were just summarizing the macro, I would say we're just afraid of the pause in every way. I mean, we just are so uncomfortable in a moment. I mean, I used to be on stage and I would make them sit for 1 minute on an iPhone timer, and they would just, just a minute of silence. So everybody's so uncomfortable. We don't know what to do if we can't pick up our phone and fill it in. It's just how we've been trained.
So true. So true. And I feel like the trend is probably getting exacerbated with AI and things being more digital. One of the phrases that I loved, Juliet, in your book was the thieves of time. And I think you mentioned the 4 thieves. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about what are those thieves of time and how do they impact us?
Sure. So I know you have a lot of managers and leaders in the room. What they're looking at is, I have goals, usually growth, revenue, or competitive advantage goals, and I need to get my people from A to Z as quickly as possible. What they have to understand is where is time being sucked away en route from A to Z? Where are we losing what we call wasted payroll? It's actually not that hard to analyze and calculate, and we've done a lot of this through diagnostics over the years. What we found is that there are 4 main drivers of people losing time toward goal, and we call them the thieves of time. But what's interesting about them is they are all actually good things. They're assets that simply run amok. So if you listen to them, you're going to say, wait a minute, those are good things, but I'll walk you through it. So the thieves of time are drive, excellence, information, and activity. Now, all good things, right? You wouldn't hire anyone who didn't have drive and a thirst for excellence and a sense of being active and informed. But they tend to morph out of scale in our culture of insatiability. So drive turns into overdrive, and excellence becomes perfectionism. Information becomes information overload, and activity just becomes a sense of frenzy. And so that leader or manager is sitting here looking at their growth, revenue, and competitive advantage goals, and all they want to do is get over there. But the hose has holes in it, and the water is leaking out on the way. Too much drive is so many projects at the same time that the peanut butter is spread so thin the bread is ripping. Too much excellence. People are mired in small perfectionistic details that are losing them on their way forward. Too much information. Nobody knows when to stop researching, dashboard, scoreboard, spreadsheets. One of my favorite stories about that I just told at the Global Leadership Summit, which is the largest leadership event in the world. And I'm very lucky. I'm the only woman that's ever been back there 4 times. And we told this story about, there's a company, and you would know the name of this organization, not company. They have 184 active dashboards, and they even have a dashboard that monitors how many people are actually using the dashboards. And the funny part of the story is that even though that dashboard monitoring dashboard shows that very few people actually utilize the dashboards, they still don't remove any of the dashboards because the thief of information is tricking them into thinking they have to have all this weighty data. Well, you know what weight does? It keeps you from getting to a goal faster. So over and over and over, consultatively, and in training, we're going into companies to see that it's the same scenario. Everybody just wants to get here. They can't get there because of these obstacles, and the thieves are a big part of that.
I really like that a thing in excess can become a thief.
Yes.
Like, I heard your list. I remember reading about it, and I was like, these do seem like good things. So what strategies can people adopt, Juliet, both in the large companies? You mentioned you're also working with some smaller companies, military. If you look across, give us a few examples of how people have worked with these thieves of time.
Yes. Well, I should tell you, in terms of the smaller companies, we're extremely thrilled to start learning about companies that are much smaller than Fortune. So at the end, I'm going to give you my LinkedIn stuff, and I want to hear from people. We want to understand what it's like for them in these mid-sized, smaller companies. So we'll do that at the end. But there are many, many strategies. So if you start looking at what is keeping people from those goals, the thieves show up amidst our daily business activities. So that is email management, meeting management, calendar management. We call it desk skills because a lot of people, I'll tell you, when I met my very first person in the Air Force, my first airman, I was nervous because I didn't know anything about the military, and I was interviewing him, and I asked him so many questions that he got defensive, and he goes, "Ma'am, they don't teach us email." And I thought, well, I should get a t-shirt that says they don't teach us email, because all those knowledge work things that I just rattled off, emails, meetings, calendar management, decision-making, we actually don't really teach people. We just sort of think that because it's at a desk, that they will magically be able to sit down and do it intuitively. And it is one of the greatest losses to business moving forward is this wasted time. So the thieves are interlaced throughout. I can give you some specifics. I know everybody likes actionable. So within the world of email, let's do just a couple things. You've got this crazy overloaded inbox. You need to tame it. What are your first few steps? Well, first of all, you can create one CC FYI folder, and you train everything where you're not on the to line to go into that one folder, and you check it only once a day because you're not really as important on those threads. Already, boom, your inbox is shrunk now because all the CC stuff is elsewhere. FYI, reply to all, wedding announcement, it all goes in there. Because that's what it is. We say reply to all, I'm getting engaged, and then 730 emails later, we've made it through the engagement announcement. Next, you teach your team to use a tool called the yellow list. This is absolutely transformative if you use it in a community together. So instead of sending when you have impulse, typing, slacking, emailing, texting, you adopt a tiny moment of white space. You learn to take a little wedge of time, and you stop and ask yourself, is there any reason that I'm sending this digitally? Because if there's not a copy or a link or an attachment, you could often just jot it down on a list, the yellow list for the person. And then when it gets a little full, you go, "Hey, Ted, can I go through my yellow list with you?" And you go boom, boom, boom through those items. No one is copied on that conversation. It doesn't come back to you in a thread, back and forth, back and forth. So moving from digital to oral is one way to do that. If you're feeling just kind of a spinning sense of the thieves driving you in all sorts of different directions, a wonderful way to begin the day is what we call a paper anchor. That's just usually a Post-it notepad or a pad. It has to be paper next to your computer, and on it you write the 3 or 4 things that you're going to tackle as the most important things that day. Now, the reason that it's paper is because paper is psychologically simple. If you have Asana or OneNote or whatever you go into, as soon as you have entered the digital realm to check what you have to do, you're now inside the digital universe and your attention is going to be pulled in 70,000 directions. But when you're in paper, none of that happens. It's an anchor. It just drives you beautifully forward. You cross off the first one, you do the next one, you cross off the next one. So there's this beautiful analog, old-fashioned calmness that comes with having a paper anchor. In the world of meetings, I'll just give you a couple because I know we could just go on and on and on. Rolling dismissal, one of my favorites, means when somebody's done with their part in a meeting, they should leave. We just keep everybody. People have parts, right? So rolling dismissal means, Derek, thanks so much. I think you can take off now. Ted, thanks so much for your info. You can scoot. And people are imminently grateful. Another wonderful thing you can do, I'll bring out my cow phone now, is you can send a little voice memo instead of a meeting and exchange them in asynchronous communication. So instead, let's say we have a 30-minute meeting to talk about planning a retirement party for this guy, Ted, I keep talking about. I can say, hey, I don't know, I'm thinking of a Mexican theme. What do you think? And you text me, send me back a voice memo. Mexican is not that exciting, but I was thinking of a pirate theme, and we go back and forth. And maybe we exchange 4 one-minute voice memos. I'm using a personal example, but it could be, I'm trying to figure out how we do the load out at the event this weekend. And by exchanging or any other business thing, we get to hear each other's voices. We hear 3-dimensional context. We hear tone, but we don't have to be taking the time in a meeting to exchange that information. So I could honestly go on and on and on with those kind of hacky tips, but there's a few for you.
Those are amazing. Personally, I'm guilty of using sticky notes on my laptop. And you're right. I do start the week with what I'm going to do, but as soon as I open my laptop, I'm sucked, like you said, in the digital world.
You don't even control where your energy goes once you're in there. But there's this beautiful thing about the paper, and of course, feels so good.
Satisfying. So satisfying.
Right? Yes.
So satisfying. Yes. Okay, great. So, I love what you're saying about, I'm hearing it as being more deliberate, being more thoughtful, the power of the pause. So when you think of, in your work, Juliet, rolling this kind of thinking out into organizations, what are some of the things that leaders can do to appreciate the power of the pause, be more thoughtful, be more deliberate? So what tips do you have for leaders listening to this and saying, I love it, Juliet, but what do I do next?
Yes. So first of all, you need to pursue the norms that you want and build them with patience, because culture, this big word, is just one, like a quilt, one norm and then a square of another norm and a square of another norm. And all of a sudden, now we have a culture. So how do we treat vacation? Do we actually go on vacation or do we stay connected? How do we treat boundaries? Do we run over every meeting or do we actually look at the time? So our culture is just a block of norms. And leaders can begin to think through, where are the norms where we have the most organizational pain, and then attack them one at a time. And again, I'm a little more familiar with the organizational pain of big companies. I want you guys to write to me and tell me, what is your organizational pain at the smaller levels? But what I believe it is what we call the wheel of drag. And it's just this feeling that targets are always lagging, so we push harder, and then quality degrades, and then we push harder, and then everybody starts getting burnt out, and we don't know, and then targets are lagging, so we just go round and around and around. And so what are the ways to break that cycle? Well, first of all, throughout your organization, you should norm a tool called the wedge. The wedge is a 5, 10, or 15-minute chunk of white space that you insert in between every single meeting. When you look at your calendar, it should have white stripes, which indicate those pauses. They are not only recuperative, they are preparatory. They are the moment where you can write your notes into your CRM or wherever you write notes afterwards, so you don't end up at 5:20 with a stack of paper that you have to enter. And they're also the places where we can pace our energy in this exhausting digital format where we're staring at a screen and talking so much of the time. Once you've normed the wedge, then you get a little bit of rest and relaxation in the system, and you can start looking at where are the norms where we have the most pain. One of the things that we like to playfully talk about is creating what we call a hate map. And that is taking a survey and asking people what is most frustrating to them at work, visually graphing it like you would a heat map with color as you would temperature or weather. And extra credit if you post this publicly somewhere where you can have people really see, wow, our meeting culture is the number one thing that people complain about. Or, wow, the fact that siloed departments can't exchange information well is bright red on this map. A less facetious version of that is just to do diagnostic work. And that's one of our biggest passions, is going in to actually do work to see where is the pain. I think it's amazing how many leaders just decide what their organization needs based on their opinion. I think that's really scary, actually. And so going in to do interviews, surveys, focus groups, beyond those traditional pulsy surveys, real diagnostic work, give you a starting point, a benchmark where you say, now we've snapped a chalk line and we know what we're doing in our organization. So those are just a couple ideas.
That's great. And Juliet, I think you mentioned that one of the emerging areas you're looking at is how AI is impacting thoughtfulness and pausing and being deliberate. So tell us a little bit more about what are you finding based on your work with clients?
Well, as you repeat the phrase pausing, I feel like a need to reinforce that it is in the white space that amazing things happen in the default neural network of your mind. So we're not pausing work, we're pausing activity so that we can be thinking up the next game-changing idea or getting clarity on our future vision. There are many business relevant things that happen in this cessation of activity moment. I feel a need to clarify that. But the AI situation, we've been calling kind of a two-legged race. And if you remember from summer camp, the two-legged race is where you both have legs. You have your left leg and your right leg together in a bag, and you must pace each other. And if you don't, bad things happen. LinkedIn just came out with some research. 51% of people say that learning AI is like taking on a second job. 41% of them say it's affecting their well-being. And 35% of them say they don't like to or refuse to talk about AI at work, which is just disastrous considering how good it can be for people. So what leaders need to do, and if you're in a company where you have the ear of anyone who is driving this AI adoption, please put a vote in for you must remove before you add this learning. Because what leaders did is they added AI onto completely full plates. Where was this learning supposed to go? In the non-existent cracks in between people's days. And so we must say to people, I'm going to remove this project plan or task. And now I want you to add more AI education. That is a math equation that human beings can live with. But just adding when the cup is already full is a recipe for disaster. And so if we want to use all the sexy, amazing benefits of AI, we need to clear a part of our dinner table to sit down and learn it. And that is a critical message for right now.
Okay. You're right. There is not that much space and time, and it is being added for sure. Julie, let's move to my favorite part of the interview, which is the quickfire.
Okay.
And so I'm going to give you a sentence or a question, and give me a phrase or a sentence that just comes to mind.
Okay. It's like a psychological test. I'm ready.
Yes, you've not heard these questions before, so first thing I tell you. All right, here we go. 5 questions. Number 1, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
What's one word you would use to describe the art of communication?
Nuanced.
How is AI changing the way we communicate?
It's making us worse at it.
If you could give one piece of advice to someone preparing for a big presentation, what would it be?
prepare 3 hours longer than you think you need to.
What's something you wish you knew about business communication when you started your career?
To be way more generous and not to be asking for myself in my communications.
Okay. And what is the most common mistake you see people make when they're trying to communicate their ideas?
I would say that the word like is probably the most common mistake. But I think self-oriented communication would probably be second. I do this, I want this, I think this, and forgetting the you.
Forgetting the audience. Thank you. That was awesome. So, in a world that often prioritizes speed over substance, Juliet, you reminded us of the transformative power of creating white space and pausing. But before we wrap up, any final thoughts for our listeners, and where can they connect with you to learn more about you and your work?
Yes, the final thought, I guess maybe it's funny, I talked about generosity, but here's a selfish question. As I mentioned, we are dying to learn more about what is it like for you? If you're in a mid-size or smaller company, what is it like for you right now? So the same answer to where can you reach me, which is LinkedIn, will be a place that you could DM me with what's the number one thing that you really need and want right now? Because we're deeply, deeply studying you. And I also, JulietFunt.com is always available to people. There's lots of resources there. They can get the first chapter of my book for free and team tools and all sorts of other good stuff.
Awesome. Juliet, thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for being generous with your time.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So next week, we'll continue exploring the art of communication and leadership with another incredible guest. Until then, let's think deeply, speak simply. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Think Deeply, Speak Simply. This episode was brought to you by Prezent, your secret weapon for brilliant presentations. Visit Prezent.ai to transform how you communicate. Until next time, keep thinking deeply and speaking simply.